Hi there, I'm your host Clive Serkin, and welcome to the Unstuck podcast, where we're on a journey to help you get control of your work environment, get yourself unstuck, and perform to your full potential. Okay, so today I have a very interesting guest. He is the highest paid CMO in the business, earning all of $1 a year as the CMO of the city of Chicago, but also the CEO of World Business Chicago. So, Michael Fassnacht, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on your show, and I love the intro. You make me sound very affordable.
Listen, there's a whole conversation. We can go down a rat hole there, but I think it's so funny. Like, I don't know if you remember, but I first met you when you were head of data at FCB. So well before I was helping a client with the pitch, and FCB was pitching, and they wheeled you in as their big point of difference. And you had that. You'll correct me, but I remember it being called something like the data wall,
The smart wall, yes.
the smart wall, right?
2006.
2006, and it was without a doubt the most differentiating thing I'd seen. At the time was very, very, very innovative. Okay. Fast forward, we're now 2022. You're the CMO of the city of Chicago. I do want to get into, World Business Chicago in a second, but let's talk about, that journey and what is it what does it mean to be the CMO of the city of Chicago? Because I would imagine as part of that, you're building the brand of the city of Chicago, and I'd love to talk about what does that mean? What's the role? What does success look like and how you attack that? Because it's a long way from the data wall.
Very good question. So first of all, the city never had a chief marketing officer. So Mayor Lightfoot decided, like late 2019 or 2020, I think we need a chief marketing officer because I think as marketers, you want to be always, your brand should always be slightly better than reality. Not too far becomes unbelievable, but slightly better. Chicago, I think we have the opposite problem. I truly believe, a lot of other people as well, that the reality is better than its brand perception. So the mayor thought, hey, who can we find that doesn't cost too much money? And since I was on the way kind of out of leaving Footcon Belding after 10 years of being the CEO over there, I loved, I worked on the public sector pro bono on a few projects. I enjoyed that. So I met Mayor Lightfoot and we clicked, and I joined her in March of 2020. And my job is really fourfold of how to think about the brand of the city. First, to residents, because if our residents are not the best brand ambassadors, you cannot win. Second is businesses, corporations, to make sure they stay and grow and to attract new ones. Third, talent. As you know, every industry is about who can attract the best talent. And fourth is tourism and convention. As marketers and agency leaders and marketers and our clients, we know we have constraints. My constraints are very simple. I have more or less no budget and I have no team.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out how do we make some.
Other than that, you're doing great.
I'm doing great. So I become much more strategic advisor to the mayor, to the mayor's press office, to the key commissioners. But I'm also fortunate enough, as you know, we have an amazing group of creative agencies and media agents, PR agents in Chicago. And I have now over 30 agencies in Chicago who are willing to do pro bono work to make the city of Chicago better for all its residents. And I'm working with them. And I have right now 7 or 8 projects. We just launched an airport-centric campaign on Monday with my old agency. We're doing a few other great projects that are coming out soon. So that's kind of my agenda. It's all about promoting the city of Chicago locally, nationally, and internationally. That's the role.
So, and how does that work? Because you have 2 jobs. You have 2 day jobs. The CEO of World Business Chicago, I don't know. Obviously, I know about World Business Chicago, but I'm not sure how broadly people are aware of it and what it means and what's the agenda. Yeah. I'd love you to just talk a little bit about World Business Chicago and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost that we are the economic development arm for the mayor's office and City Hall and the city. What does it mean? Economic development means we're helping existing large firms to stay in Chicago and expand. Second, we're attracting new companies to Chicago. And then third, we're also promoting the brand of Chicago to talent, to the workforce. So that's the simple version. We have clearly underlying capabilities like workforce team, a team that focuses on a startup ecosystem and venture capital, And as well, just a traditional business development team that pitches to companies every day. Come to Chicago, hear the reasons why, hear potential sites, hear the reasons why the workforce is amazing, and building the connective tissue in the existing ecosystem within the business world, universities, capital, to make this an attractive climate for business to grow.
Uh, so you're making a pitch to sophisticated audience, and without a doubt, I've been lucky enough to be living in Chicago since 1989. It's an extraordinary city. It's absolutely beautiful, and there's all kinds of things. But there is also, without a doubt, some issues. There are some
Yep.
challenges, real challenges that everyone's aware of. How do you navigate that? Because you're making a sale, and it's not like you can hide reality. Reality is open in plain sight.
So first of all, as we know, even companies make emotional decisions. So if a company makes a decision, oh, I'm moving or expanding, it's not just all rational. So I do have to tell an emotional story and tell the energy of our great city. And to kind of a little bit go away from like the safety issues we have in Chicago right now, I tell companies this is a 10 or 20 or 30 year long decision that you're making right now. You can't just look at the present. If you move to Chicago, you expand, you're betting on the future of Chicago. And I try to focus on the key ingredients why I personally as well believe Chicago is well positioned. It comes down to talent. It is always talent, talent, talent. Look, we have 200,000 undergrad and grad students here, amazing workforce, very diverse workforce. I think the second reason is the diversity of our city is one of our largest long-term competitive advantages. Young people want to work in a diverse environment. Third, don't bet against urban centers. Urban centers matter. They will matter as well in the future. And then fourth, which is a little bit more challenging to talk about, we are one of the most climate resilient cities in North America. What does it mean climate resilient means? We have access to a body of fresh water, like no other big city in North America. We are less impacted by the global sea rising because we're not on the coast. It does not mean we have to attack and tackle global climate crisis and change, but that's a factor that companies are looking at.
No doubt about it. I mean, I had the privilege of working for two large companies, Kimberly-Clark and Kellogg's, and in both instances, I made a case successfully for opening a small office in the city, and a big part of my pitch was talent. And in particularly in this instance, it was like marketing talent and importantly, data, digital, tech talent that we were trying to create. And at the time, and it still continues to be true, there was a ton of really high quality talent, and relative to the cost of either coasts, very cost effective. And in both cases, I think we were successful to the point where now my understanding is Kimberly-Clark is moving the entire operation from North America from Wisconsin down into Chicago.
That's correct.
I believe that's coming.
Early last year, it's a big announcement that Kimberly-Clark is moving. And like I said, for them was access to not just town, to diverse town. Because as a company, if you don't reflect your workforce, the diversity of the nation, you cannot win. And I think companies realize this more and more.
Absolutely. Now I've switched roles and I've gone from large blue chip Fortune 100 companies to the startup world, not just in tech. I'm involved with Philotech, which is an incredible success story, and Equilibria, a CBD company, and so really interesting players. And I was astounded by the state of the startup community in Chicago and how vibrant it was. And I remember back in the days when 1871 opened, and it was kind of I don't mean this in a negative way, it was a bit of a novelty and an outlier. And now you look at the VC community, whether it's Hyde Park Angels or Hyde Park Ventures or C2 Growth, which is just an extraordinary VC that I actually do work with. Talk to me about how that happened. Like, that didn't happen overnight.
No, the previous administration with Raimano was very focused on that, to build the tech ecosystem. I'm part of the launching team for EP13, which is focused about making us a global tech hub. So there are a lot of different initiatives. And I think just the sum of all the different players, City Hall, private companies, incubators, VC, it all comes down to talent and the entrepreneurial spirit. And as you know, I mean, last year was our largest successful VC capital inflow year ever. We raised over $7 billion money that was invested in Chicago-based startups. We had 12 newly minted unicorns. We never had it before. So we really now, I think, becoming more a global tier one center because of all these different factors. And we cannot forget our universities, research centers, Argonne Lab, Fermi Lab, and our colleges who are just tremendous. They got better about the tech transfers, meaning how can academics build up their own companies. So I think that mix over the last 10 years is really, creating a lot of benefits for us. And I think this year is starting again very strong. I think quantum computing will be a leader in North America, will be another accelerating force for our startup system.
And so obviously you've had structural and self-imposed barriers along the way. When we talk about COVID, for example, and how do you deal with these? I mean, the reality is, and the other part of it is, you have a very, very public job. I mean, all of us in C-level roles, we play out in the open, but boy, CMO of a city is about as public as you can get. Has some of that pressure come away as we're coming through COVID to the degree that we're coming through it? Do you sense that, or is it just you're relentless and it's part of the reality of life and you got to navigate it?
That's a very
But
good
by the
question.
way, I'm not recording pictures, but I'm looking at you and you're looking quite relaxed.
Yeah,
You
I don't take, despite my reputation, I don't take myself too seriously quite often.
Yeah.
It's a very good question. I mean, as you know, I was CEO for a pretty large agency, which you thought, oh, you're like in the spotlight. It is nothing comparing to being the public world. I'm definitely much more cautious and mindful of how I communicate or I present myself in every single instance because you're always a public figure. I don't, I'm big, as you probably know, I have a pretty big presence on LinkedIn. My chief on staff manages my Twitter account. I cannot look at Twitter. It is so toxic and negative. It's just not my cup of tea. But the nice thing as well in the role that I'm very fortunate, to have the support of the mayor and her guidance and coaching, is when you do something right, it has a lot of positive impact. If I look at the companies, we moved 39 companies to the south and west side last year. So we created jobs. We helped with the Discover call center that creates 1,000 great jobs in Chatham. So you really make an impact in people's life. And I think that's the rewarding piece. And since I'm really close to the mayor, I mean, my job is nothing compared to how public she is and the criticism. The spotlight she's every 24/7, which is just unimaginable, seeing it up close. So I'm still pretty fortunate. Most people still don't know me, which is perfect for me.
You're behind the front. So let's talk about that. I'm curious. What's it like? First of all, I can't imagine why anyone would want to run for mayor, just given the reality of everyone's a critic. I got to believe everyone asks you this question: what's it like working with the mayor, and what's she like as a leader and a boss and a collaborator? And talk about her.
So, I mean, I did not know her before I had this job. I mean, I just knew the public image of her. I mean, she's a super, super smart woman. She's hard working. And I think she has the right North Star of what needs to be done to change the trajectory of the great city of Chicago. We have to just acknowledge while the last 10, 20, 30 years, we did a lot of great things. If you look at downtown, Millennium Park, I mean, so much great things happen. We have systematically neglected our neighborhoods on the south and west side for decades. And it was not by coincidence, it was intentional. And so for her to always look at this equity lens, always, what are we doing for every single neighborhood, not just the north side? I think that's very refreshing. That's a great guidepost for me. I mean, she's very demanding, but she's also, I tried to, especially at the beginning when I started working with her, show the human side of her. She's funny. She's great on camera when she wants to be. So I'm a big fan for her. I don't agree with everything that she does or says, and I tell her that. But we have a very strong relation. I'm a huge fan of her. And she has a great eye for creative work. When I tell her a marketing idea, she always has some ideas, and she's up for things that a lot of mayors would not be up for.
That's incredible. I mean, the reality is, I have a point of view is the reality is you can choose to disagree with an elected official. That's to the degree it's almost your responsibility to have an opinion, right, and to weigh in. I have two questions, one thought and one question, but um, there is also an incumbency as a resident of the city to be supportive, yeah, because at the end of the day, politics notwithstanding, we all benefit if the city does well, and by definition, if the mayor does well and the administration does well, we all benefit and do well. What what would you tell the people of Chicago, the residents, me? How how can we be more constructive? Because I get a sense a lot of us sit back and observe the negatives and are concerned about the negatives, appropriately so. But I'm not sure what I can do. I mean, I'm short of me running for office, which would be a disaster. So let's park that for a second. What can we do? How can we be more useful and constructive?
I think it's a very good question. First of all, I agree with you. I mean, and the mayor, he's a public figure. She got like it. People can criticize her, but my view is as well. So, what are you doing? And I think first, I hope some business leaders listen to this podcast. I always tell business leaders, you cannot just be business leaders nowadays. You have to be a civic leader as well. And it's not about charity necessarily. It's like, how do you use a business to make a difference? I mean, when Discover Financial Services made a decision to open up a call center on the South Side, that was the perfect intersection of the right thing to do and good for business. I had tried to help companies to find this intersection. And as a resident, I always like to say we have 77 neighborhoods. Our research shows that 90% of all residents stay within at max 20 neighborhoods every single year. Just explore another neighborhood. Go to a restaurant. By the way, this is for residents on the south and west side. We're never in the north side and vice versa. Explore another neighborhood. Meet people from a different background, a different history, because we live in this bubble factor and we just hear the same message all over. Reach out, branch out, and find one passion point. I don't know if it's dogs, if it's schools. Find something where you contribute and meet people that are outside of your normal comfort zone. I like to say now, Chicago is a city of stories, of many, many stories. And too long, we are focused on just a small aspect of these stories, who are male, white, heterosexual, downtown. And we all, as residents, to look at all the stories of all of Chicago.
And not, I remember when we talked probably a year back. You talked about the 77 neighborhoods, which I've been here since '89. I know there's a bunch of neighborhoods. I never thought about it in terms of 77. Do you think, as businesses, and you said there's a responsibility as a business to make a difference, and there's an intersection between doing good, as in writing a check and making a donation, and making it commercially viable. And I'll put it this way. In my prior world, at various times I was responsible for sustainability or corporate social responsibility. And I had a point of view that said that you should make it commercial, that you should be unabashedly commercial about these things, because writing a check is a one-time deal. It's sort of like taking a painkiller. It's going to wear off. If you make it commercial, that there is a profit involved and there's a return involved, it'll be sustained.
Yes.
Do you think that? Do you agree? Because that's my point of view. And if you do agree, are you seeing enough companies taking that position and being aggressive, or do you think that they're still doing, how do I say, tokenism?
It's a very good question. First of all, I agree with you. It's not just about the charity. We want the company's business to make all 77 neighborhoods better, not just like a donation. We like the donation story, to be clear.
Yeah.
So I see definitely a sea change that more and more companies want to make a difference. They realize if we live in Chicago, we benefit from the ecosystem of Chicago. I, as a company, also have to give back to make sure that we remain a world-class city. And we cannot, in 2020, be a world-class city if not every resident has an opportunity to grow and build a career. So, but I think a lot of companies don't know what to do. So we, especially Warp in Chicago, we're trying to make it easier. Is it like open up like an office space or factory or call center on the south and west side? Is it looking at your HR requirements? Who are you hiring? You really need a 4-year college to give you all the job. Are you allowing returning residents, people who are in prison, to be hired. They were like, a couple of years ago, some company had a policy, you cannot hire a felon, which is not right. People who made a mistake and paid their price should be allowed again to work. So there are a lot of things, and not every company has to do everything, but the company should at least, okay, this is the one area where I want to make a difference.
It's the two instances that I'm aware of, I'm going to talk about them, and then I have a question, which is, how do we make these stories more visible, so people get inspired by them and see what it is? So, example number one, I happen to have guests on a podcast that we're going to release. We're going to drop it in 2 weeks. The co-founders of a company called Everybody Eats, Trish and Nicole. And they're a small startup food company, fantastic food, very interesting positioning. But what struck me about them, after I finished recording, they told me a story that I'm going to get them back to talk about. And they said that every one of their employees, and I forget how many they got, but they got in the 30, 40, 50 probably region. But every one of the employees in the manufacturing facility has been touched by gun violence. And I was astounded. And the reason they said is because they have a very purposeful and choiceful hiring policy. So they bring in people who have had issues in their life, that have had struggles in their life, within the purpose of getting them back on their feet and helping them change the trajectory of their life. And it's not just giving them a job. They were explaining to me that they then spend time with each one of them individually, working with them to open bank accounts, to go and get loans, to go and buy a car, and to make sure that they're not the victims of predatory financing and things like that. I was just astounded. So that's like one incredible story, and I'm definitely, we're going to get them back and we're going to talk about it. Another one that I think you're obviously familiar with is the previous administration. I got involved in the hatchery, which Natalie Schmulik, the CEO of it, and the intention of that was to create an intersection of, in the food industry, a startup world, but in the Garfield Park community, which would create jobs. And it's been, by all measures, I think, an extraordinary success. And
great success.
And my involvement was as the chief growth officer of Kellogg's, and we did it because we thought it was a commercial decision that happened to have a residual partisan benefit. So I throw this two out as like, there's got to be hundreds and thousands of those kinds of examples. They don't seem to get press. How do we tell that story?
It's a very good question. I mean, the local media is very challenging because, I see it every day. Most of the local, especially local journalism, they don't want to show the reality, the good and the bad. They just focus on mostly the negative. So that's why I like this. The stories, the good stories that happen every day are not being highlighted. So to some degree, I still, I'm meeting with Cranes and the Tribune guys and the Sun Times and now with WBZ. And so I always talk with them and try to emphasize it. But like, me, I try to be much more on social media, on LinkedIn, tell the story. I become the chief evangelist for all these stories.
Right.
And I encourage other people. As we did this campaign that got a lot of attention, some positive, some negative, like the Chicago Not in Chicago. We said, hey, we want to highlight the stories to realize the Chicago store not just happened in Chicago, they happen in other cities. Without the amazing brilliance of Chicagoans, some of the urban centers would have never been like they are today. And this is just one small facet. That's not a tourism campaign. On Monday, we launched on the airport things, to highlight our over 30 public beaches or our public parks or other things. So I think, as a brand, like a city, like you as a brand, you don't have one tonality. You have a lot of different facets to you, to your history. And we are just sometimes very narrow-minded when we look at Chicago. That's why I don't like any of the taglines of Chicago, Second City, Cedar Broad Shoulder, Windy City. They're limiting of our mental model of the city of Chicago. My job is to open this up with people like you who tell stories of great Chicagoans.
Well, then, just to be clear, I'm not looking to be Pollyanna or a softball conversation with you. The reality is, the press should cover the issues we have, and they're massive issues, and they're a real problem. What I'm saying is that they should also tell the stories, because one way to get at the fundamental issues is to illustrate the differences that small people can make. Because there gets to a point where you go, the negative is so big that I can't address it.
Mhm.
So you throw your hands up as opposed to it's a systemic issue and a structural issue that's going to take a long time to affect. Um, Question. You and I met with a very good friend of mine a while back, Rich Alapak, who has this wonderful We All Live Here project, and it's extraordinary. Rich is special, but there's a lot of people like Rich out there that are community based, small operators going in and making substantive change and difference at a very local community. How does the administration think about those kinds of operators, um, and how do they get the help that they need to scale? Obviously, one way is through corporate
Mhm.
and having. How do you think about it?
Very good. So two thoughts. And first is, I think this administration, also my team, we're not coming to neighborhoods with the solution. First, we have to listen exactly to these community leaders who know that neighborhood, that community much better than I ever will. So first, I think, especially from the agency world coming, you have to relearn again your listening skills, and like instead of just selling, learning and listen. The second, especially in my world, I look what we're doing in June, like what we call a Black and Brown Excellence Award show, because we want to highlight the top 40 Black and Brown owned businesses that are already up for scale. A lot of times big corporations want to help, but they don't know who are the companies that are ready up to scale. So we are highlighting much more than in the past the great success stories of Black and Brown entrepreneurs. We have a venture summit end of May. We're bringing venture capitalists, corporations together and highlight startups. At least 2/3 of the startups we are highlighting will be Black and Brown or female owned. So we are very intentional who we're giving airspace to, who we are promoting and highlighting. And that is very different than I think just 5 years ago.
Listen, you got to start somewhere. By the way, you answered the question, and it's not lost on me the irony of two foreign-born people talking about this wonderful city. I mean,
But
do you,
isn't that great?
I mean, in a sense, it sort of talks to the vibrancy of it. Do you get a lot of people asking you how is it possible that a German-born guy lands up?
I mean, I think this is an amazing country. This is a great city. Most people never ask me that, which I love. It's just, I think it's beautiful, and like that's why I will be also forever grateful to Mayor Lightfoot. I mean, she gave me that opportunity, and then I've done it for almost 2 years, and that's been one of the best experience of my life. And I learn the thing I'm learning every day how ignorant I am and how ignorant I was as running FCB. I mean, how often did I go south of Roosevelt or west of Ashland?
Right.
So it's opened up my world, and every day I'm meeting amazing people and learning something new about this country and the city, and I'm very grateful for this.
Well, let's take. I want to pivot because I mean, the conceit of the podcast is Unstuck, and a lot of what we talked about is how we get the city of Chicago unstuck and the work that you and the World Business Chicago is doing. But part of it is also about careers. And you've had a really interesting career arc. I mean, not exactly the typical career arc in the sense that, early days startup, data, moving into agency, taking over as the CEO of the agency, and then all of a sudden now you're the CMO of the city of World Business Chicago. How did was there a master plan, or the door opened and you went through it? Like how did you think about it?
So my most important thing was always that any job I have, I want to learn something. And when my learning curve is too flat, I leave. I'm out. That is one. That was always about learning. Second, I learned early on at Lufthansa in Germany, where when they ran their frequent flyer program for a couple of years, which was a great job, but also very challenging because in a German company, everyone has a PhD, everyone knows everything. I learned early on, but I'm very passionate about the work. I can never give the power over my emotional well-being to the organization. So I was 1,000% committed, work day and night. I was always independent and free, and always thought in the back of my head, I might walk out tomorrow, or they might fire me, and that gave me the freedom to make probably riskier, more courageous decisions. Like, and I'm very Republican. Like my contract right now at my World Business Chicago, I have a 1-day contract. So because they asked me, what do you want? I don't want, no. I want to have the freedom that when you don't like me anymore, and I can walk out tomorrow. Not that I will. Um, so there was no master plan, but I always wanted to learn. And I was also lucky. I met people who were betting on me. I had a lot of mentors around the career, and Now I think I'm much more a mentor for a lot of people who I try to help.
It's interesting. The $1 one day professional. It's liberating. I mean, in a sense, my experience has been is when you take fear off the table, as in the fear of failure or the fear of disappointing, and play to win, and you take swings. And I'm using trite metaphors, but it liberates you in the sense that you're more willing to be yourself, and you're more likely to succeed. I mean, I've always observed talent, and the ones that tend to do better tend to worry less about what the consequence of failure is, and more about what the result of success is. And if you fail, okay, you learn. It's c'est la vie. It's like I had yesterday as a guest Kelly Leonard, one of the most extraordinary Chicagoans, the executive director at Second City, just an extraordinary guy, late dad, and Roy Leonard, an extraordinary journalist at WGN for years and years and years. And we were talking about improv and how improv translates into business, and how the improv talent refuse to allow themselves to dwell in a mistake. In the same way that pro athletes who will have a bad play, a quarterback who throws an interception, they refuse to allow that bad play to affect the next play and the next play. And I don't see that translate as much into business. I don't know if that's been your experience.
It's interesting.
Even in a creative world, by the way, which both of us spend a good chunk of time in.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and if I look at my marketing role, and I tell people nowadays, especially since I budget constrained, the people constrained, I think much more like a venture capitalist in regards to marketing. I have 20 projects running at the same time. They still all have a master thought, but if 2 of them flop, that's fine. As long as 2 break through, and some of them are at least a double. And I think, especially I'm not Procter & Gamble with $100 million, I can do one massive campaign. I have to be much more nimble, much more VC-like minded, make a lot of bets as long as they're all marching toward the right direction. And that's partly a career as well. You have to, like you said, much more willing to take risks, because especially in today's labor market, if you have a good education, what is the worst thing can happen to you? You lose your job. You will get another job tomorrow. This is the worst thing can happen to you? Really?
Yep. But I will say in certain smaller towns, and that's another benefit of Chicago, is it's harder to walk across the street and pitch your wares to another company when there's one game in town. And I think that's part of the benefit for us. Anyway, we're as is always the case, you have a great conversation, you realize you run out of time. But I know you're a busy guy. We appreciate what you're doing and what the mayor's doing. Whether we agree or disagree, that's part of the process. But truly appreciate you making time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for everything you do for the city, and being a great thought partner and a strong voice out there. We need people like you, so please keep it up.
Amen, we will. Michael Fassnacht, the most expensive CMO that I know. Take care. Thank you, sir.
This podcast was brought to you by Screen Dragon. We break down barriers, make work flow, and unlock talent. Visit screendragon.com to see our software in action.